doing a boundary adjustment of farmland from, let's say, 20 acres from one farm being added to an adjacent abutting farm. Planning staff have said, well, they have to use just an interpretation. There's nothing specific in their plan that recognizes that type of severance. And so what I suggested was just adding the words including agriculturally related boundary adjustments. And I believe planning staff do not have any real issues with that wording. The other section is dealing with when you're doing, they're talking about farm consolidations, this is being the surplus farm dwellings. The proposed wording just simply says consolidation of farm properties located within Norfolk County. My suggestion was to add the words and adjacent municipalities. What I've been finding in particular on the applications that are adjacent to either Elgin, Oxford, Brant, or Haldeman, that the farm operations in question that are being part of the consolidation have lands and farmlands that are across the boundary in the adjacent municipality. And they certainly are, as the Ministry of Agriculture and Food said, part of the farming operation. And I'd like that recognized in the report because it gives a much better view of that particular farm operation. We had one number of years ago up adjacent with Brant. They had one farm in Norfolk. It came out at the board hearing that they actually had very extensive large farm holdings right across the border in Brant County with large livestock and other. And basically the farm operations are consolidating, they're getting bigger, and they certainly, they go beyond just municipal boundaries. And it gives the committee then the chance to consider that.
Talk about this, or?
Through you to the chair, our friend Mr. Rowe makes very good sense, and we agree with both of his suggestions. We've checked with surrounding municipalities, and they have similar policies, and we'd be glad to welcome those suggestions.
So is it going to be part of our new official plan? Okay. Next, we are unfinished items of June 19th, 2007. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just puzzled, and staff have just concurred. I think we do need a motion, or they're suggesting we need a motion to implement those changes. So
you want to make that motion?
I would make that motion if you're willing, that those two sections be changed as proposed by Mr. Rowe, or otherwise.
I'm waiting for the clerk to type it up here so we know exactly what the motion is. Okay, all those in favor? He's going to work it up, so that's okay. Opposed? None. Thank you. I think we can take at least a 10-minute break, and we'll get back to that after I think we're getting there. What a day. I'll get it. It's okay. It went under there. Not that I need it. It's okay. Thank you. That's service. So they'll be in the minutes anyway, right?
Yeah, I just don't know.
Thank you guys for all that.
Sections that Mr. Rowe.
Yes, it did.
That's a portion to be added to both family that suggests go right to the half plans. And what needs to be added? They approved both of them, so the one was a quarter one.
Because they took all that stuff away from me after the right? They just obliterated my pictures. That was nice, but daytime, like, I wanted to come in through the side door with Max and clerk, and I couldn't get in. But come on, nighttime, I get it.
Mr. Klein, I'll just be consistent at it.
No justification.
I say that.
We are still at Hamlet's review, and Mr. Klein has presented us with he's unable to make it, but we have our planning staff. Mary said that she would go through this with us and for him. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'll leave it to you.
So, Mr. Klein sent us information on Friday. I noticed a few things and sent them email back. So we've got a revised letter today and a couple of revised maps. So it might get a little confusing to get everything right, but I'll do my best to get you there.
Okay.
So on the revised document from today, on the top of page 2, we have Lloyd Wood. And this is to do with the hamlet of Wyndham Center. So there was an application to designate part of the old railway line there at the south part of Wyndham Center as part of the hamlet. And that went to the Ontario Municipal Board. What they didn't do was expand the hamlet boundary. So this is a bit of a technical thing. They changed the designation for the area that is attached behind his letter. So the fourth page, you can see that there's a 10-lot plan of subdivision on the old Canadian railway lines that Mr. Klein's client would hope to proceed with. So all that's being asked here is that the hamlet boundary be adjusted to be on the outside of that land that the board designated as hamlet residential. And we do support that. So,
Okay. Your staff support that?
yes, we do, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Black?
Make that a real quick motion.
Okay. Do we have a number, or can we just leave it the way it is, or?
It could just be the draft registered plan of subdivision as attached to Mr. Klein's submission.
Okay. Councillor Black, did you want to talk to your motion, and then Councillor Wells?
Not really, just support it. Planning staff supports it, so let's do it.
Councillor Wells?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'll be supporting the motion, and I just want to congratulate Mary. Mary, you did a wonderful job. Very short, very short, very short.
Okay, all those in favor? That is carried unanimously. Moving on.
The next one from Mr. Klein is Robert Kirsten, which is in the hamlet of Langton. And what he's discovered, this was in what went out to you, or it's today on these legal size papers. It's the second one, I believe. It shows the hamlet with a long cul-de-sac going back, and I think there's about 28 lots. Can't read it, it's pretty small print there. Now, just let me see here. I asked him to clarify what he was talking about because the maps came in black and white. So attached to the letter of today, the revised letter, the second map in there is Langton, and it shows the cross-hatched area, and he's put a little arrow there. So what I need to explain is this map is showing the zoning and the hamlet as well. On the right side where the hatched area is, that's currently designated and zoned agriculture. What's just below that, fronting on the 12th concession, is land that is zoned hamlet residential, but it's outside of the hamlet boundary. And then you can very clearly see on the map, there's a vertical line that crosses the 12th concession, and we got hamlet OP labeled above on the north side and on the south side of the concession road. So the request is to expand the hamlet boundary to include what is currently zoned hamlet residential and the piece to the back in order that there could be 2 lots there with a deeper depth than what there currently would be permitted.
Councillor Oliver?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I gather Mary's staff do support this minor adjustment?
Matt?
The part of the minor adjustment, as part of the hamlet exercise that we went through, we were amending the boundary to correspond with the zoning. So we were amending the boundary within the black line. between the black line and the concession road. The area beyond that is an expansion, and it is minor, but it's the whole issue of need again that I raised earlier this afternoon would apply here as well. I think he has about 22 lots within the hamlet area at this time.
So that's north of the 12th concession that we're looking at here. Is that the area you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Councillor Oliver.
Mr. Chair, thanks. I still didn't, I guess I sort of got an answer to my question, but when I look at the area that is zoned hamlet or zoned residential, but outside the hamlet, in other words, the bottom half, obviously that's there and we're clearing that up, so to speak, as a housekeeping measure. Can you tell me what the depth of those lots, if we do not approve Mr. Klein's request to extend the hatched area as well, what would be the depth of the lots that his client would only be capable of having? I can't see from the plan of subdivision map here just how they are, how deep they are, whether they would be adequate to accommodate our septic requirements. In other words, are they approximately an acre, or is his request to include the hatched area such that it would make them viable lots, both what fronts on the road and what is being behind?
Through the chair, in the comments in Mr. Klein's letter, it says the change would be approximately 4,600 square meters. And so that would be the area that would be added. And I believe it's like what's within the hamlet zoning is about 1 acre, and what you're adding is about 1. So you'd be
Okay.
making it 2
All right.
acres.
That does help me, Mr. Chairman. And so then to staff, I think we acknowledge that we have to do the housekeeping part of the 1 acre, which is zoned hamlet but not yet designated hamlet. Those would only be half acre. Essentially, you'd have an undersized lot if all we did was do that. So I personally, Mr. Chairman, am comfortable with what Mr. Klein has requested, in that it would create 2 approximately 1 acre lots fronting on the 12th concession, as compared to 1 long but not deep lot as it is now. Is that essentially correct?
Is that correct? Matt, do you want to answer that?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, I thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. And when you're ready, I would then move a recommendation that we approve that request for the hatched
I
area.
have Councillor Height.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, is that a irrigation pond in the middle of that subdivision?
Yes, it is, but it will be filled.
And we're going to allow them to build a house on said pond?
Through the chair, I have seen that happen in another area. They had to fill it, but there also had to be a time that was waited to make sure everything had settled. So I've seen that in Bill's Corners in Charlottesville before.
Okay. And now, could you scroll down a little bit for me, please? Just a little. I wanted to look at that bottom spot. So you've expanded the boundary, I guess it's to the southeast corner, and yet, and to the bottom of the other one as well. So both of those. Now, if you scroll up a little bit, so we can see some houses to the east. No, your other east. Down the 12th.
We're going west now. aren't we?
Yeah.
We're going west now. We want to go the
That's
other
the
way.
east. A little more? Okay, so instead of moving those boundaries there to the bottom right and bottom left corners, why wouldn't we extend it out? I know in the plan here it says no linear development, but obviously there's a bunch of houses there already. If you go over to 1085 as the property number, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 houses there already. Why wouldn't you pick them up in the hamlet?
Go ahead, Mary.
If I could, through the chair, we're not extending anything to the south and east. Those are what was already there. So we're just continuing those hamlet boundaries the way they were. But along concession 12, I am familiar with there being at least one turkey barn that is in very close to those houses. I think it's within that section you're talking about. I don't think it's further out. And so we wouldn't want to contravene the minimum distance separation and designate an area for development with residential uses if it's going to be in contravention of that minimum distance from the turkey barn.
Okay, zoom in on the A that's there on your screen. Yeah. See, so since there's houses there already, you're probably pretty safe with the MDS, no?
Through the chair, that's not a definite, and we'd want to look at that further. This is a good example of what could be considered through a hamlet boundary study.
Okay, because like having the bottom right and the bottom left corners opened up, and obviously they've been open for some time, but there is no development going on there. Should we not move the development opportunities where development exists already?
Go ahead.
Through the chair, we've have not had any inquiries about that. The changing of designations is something that wants to be undertaken carefully with consultation with the landowners rather than just moving it. So that's our hesitation and why we continue to recommend hamlet studies. When I've done 3 of them in the past, they've certainly had consultation with landowners and done a real thorough review of what's there before recommending changes.
Yeah, for me, I certainly don't have a problem with consultation with the landowners. I guess I have a bit of a problem that you have those designated as a hamlet, yet they're probably never going to get built up. Or if they are, it's going to be 20 years from now, and you're tying up other developments that could happen right away. And on this road, there's no clearer picture. There's a bunch of houses here just sitting just outside of the hamlet. And there's plenty of room in there for infill, which means more property taxes for the Norfolk County tax base, and instead they're being tied up by fields, which clearly takes agriculture production out of production. And I fail to see the logic in that. But thank you.
Councillor Oliver.
Mr. Chairman, further to Councillor Height's questioning though, Mary, if I'm looking at the long legal page with Klein on it, which is sort of the subject of his request here as far as that little piece in the hash mark, is that a relatively new submission of a proposed subdivision plan then on that 22 hectares, 12 hectares?
This drawing, I remember some questioning coming in last fall, but Pam's telling me there has not been an actual application submitted yet. I think there's been a pre-hearing, a pre-consultation.
I think you referenced that. Okay, so in other words, it potentially is going to be developed, even though it's within the designation of the hamlet now. And I realize there's no commitment there at all, but this is the first time I've ever seen anything even showing a proposed subdivision outline on it, which is good news. I'm really glad to see it. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I guess there was no question there. Sorry.
Councillor Oliver, you said you were going to put a motion on the floor?
I would move the recommendation, or I should say I would make a recommendation that we do support the request from Mr. Klein for a small area to be added to the hamlet designation as proposed in his revised letter to us dated June the 19th, and identified on the map as such. Because it really just makes the possibility as part of that subdivision proposal 2 viable lots within our minimum 1 meter or minimum 1 acre thing.
Okay. All those in favor? That is carried. Opposed? Okay. Next.
The next one that Mr. Klein is putting forward is from Harold Foreski, and it is in Bill's Corners. This was one that I'm familiar with back when we did the first City of Nanticoke official plan that this came in and hasn't been developed yet. But it's being put forward now. We believe, like he just says that there's a proposed street and the subdivision is only economically viable if 10 lots can be created. In the attachment numbered 4, I put an X where the proposed expansion would be required. So it's not in his previous submission where he had Bill's Corners. That's not the map you want to be looking at. You want to be looking at something of, no, you do want Bill's Corners, not Boston. It's confusing me.
Questions? Councilor Black.
Is the difference between Bill's Corners and Bill's Corners?
There's two different Bill's Corners.
Is it an apostrophe?
Go ahead.
The Bill's Corners near Boston does not have an apostrophe. The Bill's Corners west of Simcoe has an apostrophe.
Go ahead.
I think this is, at least Mr. Klein's map or whatever is incorrect, because I heard Mary reference the old city in Anico. That's sure not the one west of Simcoe. That's the one up the Cockshut then, is that correct? Okay, so in other words, in Councillor Sonnenberg's ward. Gotcha. Thank you.
Well, the map says the city of Natico.
Yeah, I know, but it says Bill apostrophe S, which is the wrong name.
Height?
Mr. Chair, could I ask staff turn our monitors back on, please? You banished us.
The network went down and it's come back up now.
Okay.
So
Next,
with the permission
Gary
of the
DeVos.
chair, I just thought I would explain now that you can see the map, that on the north road there, oh, something's gone again, but on, good. So there's just a little tiny sliver between the zoning and the official plan hamlet boundary on the north part. Pam, go back to where we were. And so he's wanting to bring the road in through that, and then it drops down to this area here. So the expansion is to allow on the other side of the road there to be houses as well.
Questions or comments? Mayor Luke.
Well, two questions. I'll ask the second one first. Staff supporting this proposed change through you to Mary? Or Matt? Or Pam?
No. The answer is no. It's the same reason as the other ones. This is a larger one than the one that you just approved for Langton, which is a minor, I would consider a minor adjustment. This one is a more significant adjustment.
So if I may, my first question would be, that little strip of land off the Cockshut at the north end to the east is the roadway, and they're proposing that the boundary go where the blue is now there, so there would be lots on both sides of a roadway. Is that, have I read this correctly?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Do you know about how many lots would be added?
There are 5 on Mr. Klein's proposal.
And I guess, understanding that staff says we have 400 outstanding lots, probably some of them not developable or they would have been gone. But if 5 lots here, that significant a change? Obviously, a number of lots can be developed on the south side.
Through the chair, the thing is, we need to be consistent with our professional planning opinion and with the residential supply study. So we've done the comprehensive review, and it says there's no need.
All right.
And so we have to maintain that professional opinion. So-
Okay, I accept that, thank you.
Further from anyone? Is there a motion? Councillor Sonnenberg.
I would suggest this proposal is not that onerous. 5 lots is not that big of an expansion. I'll support it. I'll move that we support this.
Are you going to be able to give us a description of it, or we'll just deal with what Mr. Klein has said?
Read out something if you'd
Okay.
like, Mr. Chair. That the hamlet boundary as outlined, as attached to Mr. Klein's submission in regards to Harold Poreski, sorry, in the Bills Corners, Boston, for the purposes of adding 5 lots adjacent to the proposed roadway be approved.
Councillor Wells.
Could I ask staff, Mr. Chair, through you, if we were to approve this, what negative impact would it have other than create more surplus properties?
There's a couple of things that I think could happen. When the province reviews the proposed changes, they may ask why the increase that isn't supported by the comprehensive review. So they may ask council to pull back on the hamlet designations. Secondly, you are opening to neighbors that may wish to appeal. So I do remember someone being a strong appellant to this in the past, went to the board. So if that's still there, it may be raised again. So just a couple of thoughts for you.
Councillor Sonnenberg has moved. All those in favor? Those opposed? That is carried. Moving on. Yes?
Point of interest, Bill of Bill's Corners is the father of the applicant, or was the father of the applicant. Okay.
Okay, our next one. Go ahead.
Just through to the chair, through to the clerk, just as a point of clarification, the motion should not include 5 lots. It should just be to the extension of Bill's
The
Corner Hamlet.
extension of the, yeah. Yeah.
The issue is we don't have any mapping or anything with Mr. Klein to accurately do it. So if we don't include something, the resolution that was just carried is overly vague. So if you could provide some more wording, we can maybe work it out.
Yep.
If you have the roll number, that might help.
Yeah, I just need some better eyes. So we suggest through what's been proposed as part of roll number 33604028800 to expand the hamlet of Bill's Corners.
Okay. At least we've got that one down pat, hopefully. Gary DePaw, I guess, is next.
Through the chair, what is being proposed in Linville is in the southeast quadrant, behind several lots Mr. DePauw's already created, which is not a matter for today because it's what's there. But they're proposing in-depth development with a road that would go through. I don't know if Mr. Klein says, he gives us a roll number, so he's going 405 feet to the south, as in the enclosed diagram. And he did not give us how many acres or hectares that is in total, or what the development potential would be. There's none of that here, just the map. So that's the proposal that Mr. Klein has put forward.
Questions or comments? Councillor Height.
The screen, Mr. Chair. I'm blind here right now.
All of us are. Sure, break it. It's back on your screens now.
Thank you, Mr.
Hi.
Chair. Is that what's the little square box just outside of on the south? There's a little,
Through
yeah,
the,
right there.
through the chair, that's an existing rural residential lot. Through the chair, that's an existing rural residential lot.
So then why are we not including it?
It's currently zoned agriculture. There wasn't a request to expand the boundary in any way, so we haven't, the zoning matched the hamlet designation, so we just left it alone.
But like even then, there's one up to the top left, and there's two more lots over there. I guess I can't even read. What is that? 14.915. What is that thing?
That'll be a site-specific zoning.
Right, for what type of property? Left, yeah. Yeah.
We have the interactive mapping up right now. I can't see what that site-specific zoning is about, but it's probably related to something to do with agriculture.
Further? Can't find what you're looking for? Mary?
I thought maybe it might be useful if council understood that in the past, people could build certainly their farmhouse on a property. They could sever off a lot and build a house. They could say something was surplus to their needs. So instead of one farmhouse, you now have three. And that's why the province has changed and so further restricted the way we can create more lots, because they've said that residential in the agricultural area is what is complicating things for agriculture to move forward and be as viable as they need and want to be. So sometimes when you see a lot there or you see three lots there, they may have come through that kind of policy. They may have been there from a lot longer than that. I've mentioned to staff, and they said, boy, you're old when you mention this, but after the war, there were strips sometimes that were houses along the side of the road and given to vets. And so there they are sitting there in the middle of the countryside. So there's a lot of different ways that we have these rural residential lots in our agricultural area. But Whether or not you wish to address that, I think that's a pretty complex thing. It has an awful lot of implications. And I think that's all I'll say on that, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Oliver.
Mr. Chair, I don't know whether Mary's last context was in the, or Mary's last comment was in the context of this DEPA request or not, but I'm looking at the screen, and I think you don't have it up there, Mr. Chairman, but staff have drawn the blue line on for us, which I think is suggestive of what Mr. Klein is asking to have added to the hamlet boundary. And I recall a number of years ago when Mr. DePauw was making this kind of request, there was considerable amount of concern expressed by other residents in the hamlet over water supply and additional septic systems going in, and possible concerns about both quantity and quality of water. So to me, this is one, I think, that perhaps this is not the appropriate venue for us to do it as a minor boundary adjustment to the hamlet. So I'll wait and see if somebody puts a motion forward, but at this point, I don't think I could support this one just because it is a very, very large increase. It's almost, well, it probably is a 50% or more increase in the size of the hamlet boundary. And I know there was opposition when he was proposing additional subdivision development several years ago. Thank you.
What's councillor's wish? Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I will put forth a motion that we do not approve, do not support this application.
Any comments or anything from anyone else? Councillor Sonnenberg.
I won't support it either, Mr. Chair. This is too huge an expansion. We're looking at streets and cul-de-sacs and curbs, and we're going to build another little town here. That's just too much. Thank you.
Okay. We've heard the motion, I guess, that we not support it. All those in favor? That is carried. Is that the end of them? We saw the light? Nissan, we're going to get into unfinished. What about the Nissan one? Are we going to talk about this, or is that something, okay? That's under those unfinished items from June 19th. You're on.
Well, there's a couple things, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Yes, we would like to go back to the June 6th report because that was never received as information.
Okay.
And there were probably about 9 different recommendations of changes to policy that were contained in that report. And what we did was decided to have today's special hamlet meeting, and then we didn't finish up with those resolutions.
Okay.
So if council and committee would agree to receive that report as information and accept the recommended changes to policy, that would be fantastic.
Okay. Someone, Councillor Black.
It would make that a motion.
Okay. Any other questions, or if not, all those in favor? That is carried.
The next item, yes, the Nissan one is there. I'm going to hold it to last because it
Okay.
came in last.
All right.
The next one, if we could, if council and committee would let us talk about the shoreline protection, not shoreline protection, but the hazard land, and then the Turkey Point and Long Point special, anyway, 3.8.3. I have some notes here because we did talk with the Conservation Authority a little bit about the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry guidelines that were brought up at the June 6th meeting. And for just some clarification, and then you can decide what you'd like to do. So when we talked about the shoreline policies in 4.3.2.2, that's hazard land. Everything there is hazard land. And we specifically looked down at F, which was the foundation area was what we talked about in 500 square feet. So in discussion with the Conservation Authority, they indicated that they've been using 50 square meters, which is actually 540 square feet, but, you know, it's minor, so 50 to have a nice rounded number is better. But they find that the guideline uses the term floor area, and their recommendation to staff and to you is that it be 50 square meters of floor area rather than foundation area. So that's a point for your consideration. They also suggested that the special policy area in 3.8.3 has to do with Turkey Point and Long Point, and that we should not tie that to 4.3.2.2 because that's all of the shoreline hazard area. So if you tie it together, instead of saying like a notwithstanding that section, you're actually limiting Turkey Point and Long Point more than if you just left that reference out of there. So if you want safe access, and that's it, in 3.8.3, it actually gives you more flexibility for Turkey Point and Long Point than by tying it back to 4.3.2F.
Councillor Height, and then Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you're well aware, we're going over the wetlands policy at the LPRCA. So I guess the recommendations or the stuff that they've put forward doesn't mean a whole lot of anything right now. I did bring with me today the M&R Tech Guide and what it refers to, and it does say foundation area, to be very clear. Okay, there's a few councillors that sit here that are on that review committee, and we'll see which way that goes in the very end. But for me, I find a lot of this section to be very redundant. Like I said earlier, I've gone through several official plans, and I have yet to find something that is, you know, there's this much verbiage in it. Many of the plans that I've looked at will say something similar to, in accordance with the LPRCA policies for the administration of development, interference with wetlands, and alterations to the shorelines and water courses regulation, and all other appropriate authorities. I feel that by adding all of these caveats in, that we're making two sets of regulations for this. So we could have one set where it's going to be habitable floor area, and the Conservation Authority is going to come up with one that says foundation area. Like I said, I've yet to see any other official plan that has this much stuff in it, and it's an overlap of what the Conservation Authority does. Their first mandate is to protect life and property from damage. So why are we doing it twice? I'd like to see a lot of this stuff removed and have that verbiage put in it, in accordance with the LPRCA, because they're the ones that have the people on staff to determine whether it is safe or not. If there's an engineering study that comes forward, great. I don't believe that Norfolk County hires or has in its employ a coastal engineer where they are the experts in this, and I'm not sure why we're trying to outdo them. All right, so I'm looking to have that changed to not be, I don't know, have all that wording in there. I'm not sure how I would do that right now because there's paragraphs and paragraphs of it, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Oliver, and then Brunton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just specifically on Mary's points, the first one regarding whether we would continue, and the motion, the change we did pass at my recommendation was to change it to building footprint area, as per Councillor Height's comment as well, rather than floor area, because our OP defines usable floor area as all levels. And a 500 square foot increase to floor area, if you use that definition, is quite a bit different than a 500 square foot increase to the building foundation. So I personally would not like to see us reverse that. I'd like to see it left the way we approved it, which is an up to 500 square foot increase in foundation area or building footprint area, which are the same thing. So that's just my comment on that one. I'm not prepared to support that going back. But to Mary's point, back on 3.8.3, Mary, if you're suggesting that the final paragraph there at the bottom of page 47 and the top of page 48, it would be more flexible if we removed reference to and to the policies of section 4.3, hazard land designation of the plan, then I certainly could support that. I don't recall council asking to have that word, those words put in there. I think it was put in by staff, unless I'm mistaken.
Go ahead, Mary.
Through the chair, it was put in by our consultant, Matt Reniers, and I'm going to let him
Okay.
speak to it, please.
Okay, Matt?
My suggestion was that if you put in notwithstanding section 4322F in the special policies on Long Point and Turkey Point, is be quite clear that that there's a special policy there, and